Tonight, the dangerous winter slam. Millions under alert with confirmed blizzards and tornadoes touching down. At least 5 twisters ripping through Texas and Oklahoma. Drivers trapped in the path of the storm, riding out those tornadoes in their cars. We'll show you the video. Entire homes and businesses destroyed. The same storm system creating treacherous conditions on the roads. And now millions under blizzard warnings as well. And the storm still on the move when this fast-moving system will hit the East Coast. The crypto king busted. The founder of FTX arrested in the Bahamas on criminal fraud charges, capping a stunning fall from grace for the man once valued at $26 billion. But will he face justice in the U.S.? His efforts to fight back against extradition tonight. The border emergency, a surge of migrants overwhelming immigration officials days before a Trump-era policy is set to expire. The mayor of one, Laredo, joins Top Story, how his border community is bracing for the weeks ahead. And our Gabe Gutierrez on the ground, on the border in Mexico tonight. Epidemic of corruption, deadly protests erupting in Peru after the impeachment and arrest of the president on conspiracy charges. The leaders of Guatemala, Argentina, and Panama facing similar allegations. Tonight, the growing calls for accountability in that region. Evidence inferno, a massive blaze breaking out at an NYPD warehouse in Brooklyn, likely destroying decades of evidence inside. Firefighters still working to put out that blaze. Plus, the urgent manhunt in Georgia right now. A corrections officer shot and killed while walking into work. The surveillance image just released by police as they search for his killer. And Jay Leno opening up for the first time since that fire left him with third-degree burns. The exclusive interview with our Hoda Kotb and what the comedian revealed about the terrifying moment his face caught on fire. Top Story starts right now. And good evening. We begin Top Story tonight with that severe weather outbreak. The same system pummeling the West with feet of snow, now carving a violent path through the South and Midwest. Multiple tornadoes reported as blizzard warnings remain in place. This suspected tornado tearing right across the highway in Grapevine, Texas. Several businesses damaged. At least 5 people were injured. And take a look at this. This is what the tornado looked like from the inside. Incredible video shows a driver going right through that funnel cloud. You can see the lightning flashing, debris whipping all around, slamming into the side of the car. 5 injuries reported on the ground there. And in Wayne, Oklahoma, a confirmed EF2 tornado touching down before daybreak. Roofs torn off homes, down power lines leaving, many without electricity, forcing schools to close. The powerful system bringing rare thunder snow to Sedona, Arizona. Parts of the state getting more than half a foot of snow. And northeastern Colorado under a blizzard warning. You can see the conditions already deteriorating near Iliff. We have full coverage of this monster storm as it moves east. Dylan Dreyer is here in studio to time it all out for us. But we begin down south with Morgan Chesky on the ground in Texas. And Morgan, we can see all that destruction just behind you.
Yeah, Tom, you can, and there's even more scattered throughout this entire Grapevine community. Tonight, the goal, restore power as quickly as possible after this morning was interrupted by that terrifying sound of tornado sirens. Witnesses say this storm struck fast, and it tore through building after building, leaving some without homes tonight. Just one storm of several that struck the south.
Tonight, a wild winter system's brutal wrath barrels east. Its multi-pronged path of destruction, stretching from snow-slammed Dakotas down to tornado-ravaged Texas, leaving roughly 14 million Americans across the upper Midwest and Great Plains under winter alerts. In Fort Worth today, a heart-stopping scene, a funnel appearing to touch down amid widespread tornado watches and warnings in Texas, Arkansas, and Oklahoma.
A severe weather condition.
A tornado threat forcing travelers to shelter in place at Dallas-Fort Worth Airport. In suburban Grapevine,
we ran to the bathroom, we got on the floor, and I started praying.
5 people hospitalized after authorities say a probable tornado roared through. A middle school evacuated and businesses damaged.
What did you find when you walked outside?
Debris everywhere, tree limbs down everywhere, shingles all over the yard. Pieces of metal from the Sam store across the highway about half a mile away.
Don't mess with weather. If you hear the sirens going off, please shelter in place.
More devastation in Wayne, Oklahoma, where a confirmed EF2 tornado left homes ripped to shreds, roofs collapsed or torn off, trees reduced to kindling. In nearby Norman, drivers caught in flash floods after a torrential downpour. Meanwhile, up north in the Great Plains, trucks sidelined along ice-covered highways. South Dakota's governor urging people to stay home.
We have a lot of ice and significant damage that could happen.
And in Arizona, a rare phenomenon. Thunder snow, the patchwork of damage, this severe system's second act, after earlier this week wreaking havoc out west, dumping 4 feet of snow in California's Sierra Nevadas. People shoveling out as far north as Alaska. Tonight, tens of millions hoping their power and heat hold out as a monster system continues marching east.
All right, Morgan Chesky joins us now live from Grapevine, Texas. Morgan, we've been looking at that devastation there behind you. Walk us through what exactly is behind you at this hour, and is the threat over for North Texas?
Yeah, Tom, I'm standing in front of what's left of a car wash here. This owner tells me it is a total loss. The good news tonight, those who live in North Texas should be out of the woods when it comes to the severe weather system, but it is shifting, putting people along the Gulf Coast and in the southeast at risk of nighttime tornadoes, which studies have shown, Tom, can be twice as deadly as those twisters that take place during the day. So that is where things stand right now. The power crews are behind me trying to restore electricity to this area to hopefully take away some of the pain that these folks already feel. Tom?
Yeah, those nocturnal tornadoes are so dangerous. Morgan, people who track the weather, who follow the weather, may be saying tornadoes in winter, it's a little strange, right?
It is somewhat rare, although not totally, it's happened before, although it has been a while. We do know that Dallas has seen some December tornadoes, but it's been years since that's taken place. And usually tornado warnings may be issued, but the fact that an actual twister, and not just one, but several reported in this area and to the north of us in Wayne, Oklahoma, is certainly drawing a lot of attention. There are some who say that because the conditions are right as a result of climate change, this unfortunately could be something we could be seeing more of in the future. Tom?
Morgan Chesky leading us off tonight here on Top Story. For more on this dangerous storm, I want to bring in NBC News meteorologist Dylan Dreyer, who joins us now in studio. And Dylan, we know the storm is a lot of things. One of the things it is a massive snowmaker.
Massive snowmaker that's part of this whole bigger system. So it's not just the snow, it's the snow and the wind that's making it very dangerous. We've already had about 2 feet of snowfall in parts of Utah, and now we're expecting more of the same across the Dakotas. Blizzard warnings are also in effect because we'll see those wind gusts over 35 miles per hour, visibility reduced to a quarter of a mile, and those conditions lasting for about 3 hours. That's what you need for a blizzard to kick in, and it's likely we'll see those conditions as we see this storm move eastward. So here's the snowy side. It's the northern side through the Dakotas, up across central and northern Minnesota. This will also bring snow and some ice through central and northern Wisconsin, too. As this moves to the east, you see it loses some of the snow, but by the time it makes its way into the northeast, I'd say later in the day on Thursday, we might see a brief period of snow before it changes over to rain for the I-95 corridor, but the interior parts of the Northeast will still see several inches of snow, perhaps up to about 6 to 12 inches. But it's back through South Dakota, where we still have the possibility of another foot of snow. And then you go over into Minnesota and Wisconsin, where a foot of snow is likely too. And again, we'll see that kind of speckled across the interior Northeast as well.
So a lot of snow, some rain as we head to the end of the week. That's all the northern half of the country. Talk to us about what's happening down south. We saw those tornadoes today.
And it's bizarre to see as many tornadoes as we have in December, but we do still have a very significant threat of severe storms overnight. Not just tornadoes, but wind gusts upwards of 75 miles per hour, large hail about an inch and a half in diameter or more. But there is an enhanced area tonight where we could see our best chance of strong tornadoes, and that includes eastern Texas all the way through Mississippi, including most of Louisiana as well. Then as we go into tomorrow, the threat shifts a little to the east, but still includes Mississippi. We'll add in Alabama, also continuing to include Louisiana as well. Wind gusts up to 70 miles per hour, large hail, tornadoes still a possibility. And then even on Thursday, that risk is going to move into parts of South Carolina and Georgia, down into Florida too. I don't think they'll be as strong with the potential of strong tornadoes, but still they're isolated tornadoes, and it just takes one to cause significant damage, Tom.
All right, Dylan Dreyer for us tonight. Dylan, we appreciate it. Now to the story rocking the business world. Former crypto king Sam Bankman-Fried, founder and CEO of cryptocurrency exchange FTX, under arrest tonight, fighting extradition, facing criminal charges. Prosecutors accusing him of, quote, a brazen multi-year scheme. CNBC's Kate Rooney has this one for us.
He was once hailed as the king of crypto. But today, Sam Bankman-Fried, founder and former CEO of crypto exchange FTX, is facing criminal indictments and a wave of civil complaints.
Bankman-Fried and his co-conspirators stole billions of dollars from FTX customers. He used that money for his personal benefit.
Bankman-Fried, arrested last night in the Bahamas, faces 8 criminal charges in the U.S. Authorities alleging he defrauded investors by funneling customers' money into his own hedge fund behind their backs. As a result, they say $8 billion have gone missing.
This committee will not stop until we uncover the full truth behind the collapse of FTX.
In Washington today, a congressional hearing on FTX's collapse following what amounted to a run on the bank last month. Bankman-Fried, who was expected to testify, was instead making his first court appearance in the Bahamas.
There was no corporate controls, no corporate oversight.
FTX's new CEO, John Ray, led energy giant Enron through bankruptcy after its collapse. Today, appearing before Congress, he ripped into Bankman-Fried's management.
This is just taking money from customers and using it for your own purpose. Not sophisticated at all. This is just plain old embezzlement.
At its peak, FTX had 2.7 million users in the U.S., and superstar celebrities were promoting the company.
You know what? I'm in.
Bankman-Fried was also donating tens of millions of dollars to political campaigns, including President Biden's 2020 White House bid. But today's allegations say that money actually belonged to customers. The White House saying due to the Hatch Act, it could not answer questions of whether or not the president would return the donations.
And all of this dirty money was used in service of Bankman-Fried's desire to buy bipartisan influence and impact the direction of public policy in Washington.
In a statement today, his lawyers said Mr. Bankman-Fried is reviewing the charges with his legal team and considering all of his legal options.
We messed up big.
Before his arrest, Bankman-Fried took part in a whirlwind media tour defending himself.
There are things I would give anything to be able to do over again. I didn't ever try to commit fraud on anyone.
Okay, CNBC's Kate Rooney joins Top Story Live tonight. Kate, we saw there in your report, his lawyers are saying they're reviewing all his legal options. I know there's new reporting out tonight that Bankman-Fried is fighting extradition from the Bahamas.
Yeah, that's right, Tom. So the United States has asked for extradition to New York, but Bankman-Fried's legal team plans to fight back on that request. His request for bail has also been denied. The judge citing heightened flight risk for Bankman-Fried in the Bahamas. He will remain in a Bahamian jail in the meantime. And his next court appearance for those arguments over extradition is scheduled for February 8th. So we've got a little bit of time here, and he'll be waiting it out in a jail in the Bahamas, Tom.
So, Kate, you pointed out also in your story, I think one of the reasons why people turned to FTX was they had all these celebrity endorsers, right? They also had politicians. He was donating to politicians of both parties. He donated millions to the Biden election effort. Have any of the celebrity endorsers or the politicians who took his money, are they saying anything tonight? Have we heard from them?
So it's interesting on the celebrity side. We've seen some class actions lawsuits start to pile up. They have been relatively quiet. You had names like Tom Brady and Giselle as some of the big brand ambassadors and also investors. And then you've got politicians who also took money from Bankman-Fried. They have generally said that they'll either donate it to charity or whatever type of restitution fund ends up getting set up. But federal prosecutors earlier today also requested that anybody out there that took money from Bankman-Fried get in touch with them so they can make sure that money is returned to customers. And then you've got the White House as well in terms of those political donations. He donated to President Biden's 2020 White House bid. Today's allegations say that money actually belonged to customers. So in light of that, reporters were asking the White House press secretary about that. The White House, though, saying that due to the Hatch Act, it couldn't answer some questions on whether or not the president would return those donations. So no word today on that, but it has been a theme of those that either took money or really represented FTX. There has been some silence depending on who it is.
Yeah, and I think those questions are going to continue for the White House because we were talking about so much money that's now gone, and that web, that vast web, is so long. Okay, thanks so much, Kate. Great having you on the show tonight. Moving now to the southern border, where we're seeing stunning images of migrants flooding in, stretching resources in the U.S. This is Title 42, a Trump-era immigration policy, is set to end next week. It expires. Gabe Gutierrez is on the ground for us on the Mexican side of the border, where migrants are waiting to be processed.
Overnight, even more migrants crossing the Rio Grande into El Paso, Texas. Thousands have come in huge groups just over the past several days, burning fires to keep warm, many from Nicaragua. Here in Ciudad Juarez, Mexico, tension has been ramping up. Weeks ago, riot police broke apart a migrant camp that had formed along the border. Now, shelters are filling up.
Late today, there are still hundreds of migrants that have walked across the Rio Grande and right now are waiting to get into El Paso. This new influx that we're seeing comes just days before a federal court is set to lift the pandemic-era border restriction known as Title 42.
Today, we met this family of 4 from Guatemala who arrived here weeks ago.
Now they're waiting until Title 42 is lifted before they decide whether to cross into the United States.
With U.S. migrant processing centers already crowded, and some migrants even sleeping outside, some officials in El Paso are urging the mayor to declare a state of emergency.
It is a crisis. It is a state of emergency. There's no municipality alone that could handle what we're seeing and what we're about to see with the lifting of Title 42.
Today, Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas visited El Paso, and he's facing Republican calls for impeachment. There was a record-breaking 2.4 million illegal border crossings in the last year. Critics of the Biden administration say its lax border policies will encourage an even larger influx when Title 42 is lifted. Customs and Border Protection agents tell NBC News daily illegal border crossings could reach a record 10,000 per day. This man from Ecuador says a cartel kidnapped him during his grueling journey and that he only survived because the Mexican military rescued him and hundreds of others.
All right, Gabe Gutierrez joins Top Story tonight from Ciudad Juarez in Mexico. And Gabe, this is pretty interesting. You're in Mexico. That's the river right next to you. And we see all those migrants, all those migrant families just on the other side of the river and essentially on U.S. soil.
Yeah, that's right, Tom. Let me set the scene for you. You're right. This is the Rio Grande right here, but you can wade over it. That's what migrants have been doing basically all day. And right now, yes, technically they are on U.S. soil right over there. You see the border fence. Downtown El Paso is on the other side of that border fence. And Tom, these are hundreds of migrants, many of them Nicaraguan, a lot of men, but also women and children. And they are getting ready to spend yet another night here in pretty cold temperatures. Right now it's in the 40s here in Juarez, but it's expected to get even lower into the 30s. We just saw some migrants over there getting blankets from people here on this side of the border. So again, these are migrants right now that are on U.S. soil. They're expecting to turn themselves into the Border Patrol, but right now they're having to wait in these cold temperatures, Tom.
So, Gabe, I'm curious, you know, we're about to talk to a mayor of a border city, Laredo, just after we wrap up with you. And he is concerned about the lifting of Title 42. Was the lifting of Title 42 on the minds of the migrants you've encountered so far?
Well, Tom, it's interesting because these migrants have obviously made the decision to turn themselves in ahead of Title 42 being lifted. But not far from here, there is a shelter, Casa del Migrante. We just visited it several hours ago, and we ran across a family of 4 who made the trip here from Guatemala. They've been in Mexico for about 2 weeks or so, but they are actually, looks like they're making the decision to wait until Title 42 is lifted because they feel they'll then have a better chance of staying in the United States. And right now, Tom, officials on the other side of that fence in El Paso, some of them, including the deputy city manager there, say that this is unsustainable. They expect a lot more migrants to come to these borders when Title 42 is lifted, and they're asking the federal government for help. Tom?
Gabe Gutierrez and his team on the front lines of this immigration crisis tonight. Gabe, we thank you. And for a more in-depth look at the crisis on the border right now, I want to bring in the mayor of Laredo, Pete Saenz. Mayor, thank you so much for joining us. There are estimates from our reporting that the number of migrants crossing into the U.S. could increase by nearly 3,000 more a day in a year that has already seen more than 2 million migrants illegally cross into this country. What will happen in Laredo when Title 42 expires next week?
Well, it's going to get busier for Border Patrol people in particular, and of course us here locally as well. Currently, they're seeing about 1,600 migrants that are being processed. We have a processing center here in Laredo, Texas, and even with Title 42 now in place, it upped to about 1,600 compared to about 1,100 about a few days ago. So they foresee, Border Patrol, we foresee an increase of migrants and, of course, an increase of work for Border Patrol in particular. But us, if Border Patrol at some point, once they saturate the NGOs that have been extremely helpful, and currently they're doing well, but once the NGO capacity is surpassed, then this is when us as a city will worry, because then Border Patrol will be releasing some of these migrants into our streets, and then we have to accommodate some way.
Yeah,
yes,
Mayor,
sir.
for people who don't understand, or to be frank, they don't care about what's happening on the border, can you describe to our viewers what the last couple of years have been like in your city when it comes to resources and trying to provide quality of life for both Americans and also humanitarian care for those migrants?
Correct, and you stated it correctly too. It's humanitarian crisis in a way. Yeah, for the last 2 years or so, we've lacked resources, and I say that respectfully too. Border Patrol has been just working very, very diligently, but with very few personnel. The majority of the personnel here are used for processing, and it leaves a few people out in the field by the river's edge to I guess, interdict and to intercept migrants and the drugs that come through, between ports of entry. Although the majority of the drugs do come from within the ports of entry. But as far as migrants, I mean, it's been tough. It really has been tough. I'm hoping that this year's budget for these federal agencies, in particular Border Patrol and CBP, has increased.
But Mayor, help us understand. I mean, you say it's tough, and we get it's tough for law enforcement. How is it tough for the citizens of Laredo? How is it tough for you?
Well, so far us here in the city of Laredo, thanks to the NGOs that actually handle, the number of migrants that are processed and then released to the NGOs, they in turn, do their work, and we really haven't had an issue with them. Our issue begins when the NGOs are saturated, and that's when, at the last go-around, when that occurred, the city proper started busing voluntarily these folks to other cities, to other NGOs further up the state.
Because you didn't have the space or the money to take care of them.
Correct. And although FEMA has provided some funds, we're using those funds to do whatever we need to do once those migrants are out in the streets. If it's a matter of trying to coordinate a little better, but more so asking him if we can bus them out, because if they congregate at our bus stations, at the airport, on the streets, and obviously it's not good for them and it's not good for us as well.
The busing of migrants has become so political, in part because some governors obviously have used it, to be fair, as a political tool. But you're saying it yourself. You have to bus some of these migrants because you don't have the space or the money. And what would you say to those people who have criticized the busing of migrants? I mean, does it lay on all the border towns across America? Should they brunt the full responsibility of this immigration crisis?
Obviously not. I mean, we don't. I mean, if you don't believe it, come over here and be a witness to all of this. We do our part. We want to treat people fairly by way of humanitarian basis. But yet it's work. I mean, it takes it impacts on communities. Laredo is one of them, and all the border area, mind you, I think is impacted by this immigration crisis that we have. And I'm hoping that maybe the federal government will pay closer attention to this and address it.
On this point, Mayor, you know, my friend Jose Diaz-Balart made a great point on the air today. He said leaders lean into the politics of immigration, but not the solutions. Can you give us some solutions?
Well, it depends what category you're talking about. Here locally, what's become very interesting to me is that from the numbers that are being processed here, only 10% are claiming asylum. The other 90%, more or less, are coming, breaking our immigration laws, and they're being detained, arrested, I guess is the word, and then paroled for prosecution. And then we have the getaways, and then we have others that totally evade Border Patrol and end up in stash houses, warehouses, and those are probably the more dangerous ones because they're evading Border Patrol. So
Mayor, just so I understand the picture you're painting, you're saying at least in your area, you're finding the vast majority are not trying to seek asylum. They're essentially getting in, they're getting processed, and then they're disappearing?
Well, no, yeah. About 10% are claiming asylum, and of course, those folks are released as well into the United States. The others that come in are just blatantly, breaking the immigration law. And they are arrested and then paroled, and I hear too that it takes years before they end up before a prosecutorial court of some sort, and that's obviously an issue as well. But that's for someone else at a higher pay grade to worry about.
Mayor, you've been the mayor there in a border city for a while now. If you could ask President Biden for one thing, or if you had a message for President Biden tonight, what would it be?
Send resources, fix the problem that we have here on the border. And I know it's complicated, but, the asylum seekers, I would say, can we do this remotely? Can we have a place, a safe zone or embassies, the countries of origin? Maybe that's a way to approach this, where they can avoid the trip. The others, it's because they blatantly want to be here and they come across. We need more personnel, more immigration courts. We need to enforce the laws that we have, because it's truly inviting more people here. And granted, the vast majority are looking for a better life, but yet, our laws are being tampered with and violated, and that's not necessarily a good thing for a country that should respect the rule of law.
All right. We thank the mayor for his time. Mayor, thanks for joining Top Story tonight. Now to another crisis unfolding in this country, this one inside hospital walls. We continue to stay on top of this so-called triple-demic, COVID, RSV, and the flu, all here at the same time and pushing medical staff to the brink. This ahead of the holidays. Now, the third year Americans will risk safety for celebrations. But are people taking it seriously, and should they? NBC's Valerie Castro has more.
Tonight, the country experiencing an early flu surge not seen in a decade as COVID cases rise, now draining supplies and hospital resources.
The flu numbers this year are through the roof.
Some taking preemptive measures as they face holiday crowds.
Very grateful that there's a vaccine, and we are vaccinated and boosted and flu shots and all that.
Other New York City visitors taking in the holiday sights and taking even further precaution, heeding the latest advisory from the city's health officials to mask up indoors and outside in crowded places as viruses bear down on the holiday spirit.
Did that play into your plans today?
Well, absolutely. As a matter of fact, we wear masks when we're in places with high density populations of people.
Flu numbers already raising alarm bells here.
I think we're worried and concerned that this is only going to get worse, and that we'll have to think about how to make the hospitals available for all the patients that need it.
In upstate New York, the flu infiltrated Kristen Hawes' home. She and her husband recently recovering, not long after their newborn was hospitalized with RSV.
When each of us were sick, we didn't go near the baby, which was difficult to not hold your newborn.
In California, Los Angeles County is facing a potential indoor mask mandate in January if COVID hospitalizations rise there. The triple threat of the illnesses already hitting patients and staff.
We are having significant numbers of people in the waiting room for much longer than we are accustomed to, simply because so many ER nurses are out.
Kentucky seeing an alarming spike in flu cases.
Last year, we only had 4 flu cases and 0 deaths, and this year we have way surpassed that already.
Almost the whole country experiencing what the CDC calls high or very high flu rates, all while COVID cases are creeping up.
We are seeing an uptick in cases, followed by an uptick in hospitalizations.
Still low compared to the rest of the pandemic, but moving in the wrong direction at the wrong time. ICU nurse Ashley Porter reminding everyone of the basics.
I think it's important that you be mindful of, being around people who already have, current illnesses, and just washing your hands, covering your mouth, not going places when you're sick.
All right, Valerie Castro joins us live tonight from outside a hospital, Mount Sinai West here in New York City. So, Valerie, you mentioned rising COVID rates as we approach the holiday break for both workers and school-age children. What are doctors recommending?
Well, doctors say now is the time to get vaccinated, get boosted, as well as getting your flu shot. Those vaccines can take up to 2 weeks to become fully effective, and you want to be fully protected before any family gatherings.
And, what's the advice for those holiday gatherings this year? I know a lot of people are tired, and they're being tired of being told what to do.
Well, the doctor we spoke to here at Mount Sinai says don't forget that it was around this time last year that Omicron was hitting. He says pay close attention to any symptoms you might be having, and if you do feel sick, you should just stay home. As for the flu, he warns it is affecting people of all ages at this time. Tom?
Yeah, the flu seems to just be spreading so fast. Okay, Valerie, thank you for that. We want to turn to politics now and signs of trouble for former President Trump. A new poll from USA Today finding Republican voters prefer Florida Governor Ron DeSantis over the former president in a hypothetical 2024 primary matchup. Look at that. 56% picking DeSantis, who is on top, but in this graph is on the bottom there, with just 33% backing Trump. The poll just the latest problem for the ex-commander-in-chief, who is facing growing doubt within his own party. I want to bring in NBC News political analyst Brendan Buck. He's the former press secretary for former House Speaker John Boehner, and he's currently a partner for 7 Letter. Brendan, thanks so much for joining Top Story tonight. Have Republican voters officially dumped Trump?
Not officially, but there are signs that they're getting ready to. I think the thrill is gone for a lot of Republicans, but certainly not all of them. I think that what we're seeing here is that Trump, who for many years among Republican voters was seen as a winner, is starting to look a lot more like a loser. Obviously, we had a tough election in 2018. He lost the White House in 2020. And this past election, while the Republicans took back the House, was really tough for Trump-backed candidates. So, I try not to give too much credit to your average voter for thinking about things like electability. But it's hard not to look at Donald Trump right now and worry about whether this is a person who can get reelected with all of these investigations, with all of these scandals, and his seemingly inability not to associate himself with really bad people. So I wonder if there's a lot of people who are starting to say, we've had a nice run. This has been fun, but time to turn the page. I'm not quite ready to write his political obituary. That has been started a lot of times, and we've had to learn that lesson. But there's certainly signs of it.
What's the draw on DeSantis? Why do you think Republican voters are trying to learn more about him and essentially picking him over the former president, at least in this poll?
Yeah, I think what this poll showed, and I think what it asked, was somebody who can deliver Trump policies but come through a different person. I think people like what Trump stands for, but they know that he's maybe a little out there, a little crazy, a little too much chaos. Ron DeSantis, if you're a Republican, it checks all the right boxes. Obviously, he got really on the national stage during COVID, rejecting a lot of the shutdowns that a lot of other places were doing. And frankly, he has a lot of the right enemies. If you're a Republican, the media fights with him. The left doesn't like him. That's kind of what sells these days. So I think that he's appealing in a lot of ways. I caution a little bit on Ron DeSantis because we just don't know. He's not really tested on the national stage. I think back to Scott Walker, the Wisconsin governor.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up. I mean, 2016 is a very good reminder. Governor Scott Walker from Wisconsin, Governor Jeb Bush, also from Florida, and Donald Trump then, before he became president, ate them up very quickly, and they didn't survive very long in that primary process. How many candidates would you be comfortable with getting to Iowa, New Hampshire as the voting starts, as somebody who's involved in Republican politics? Because if there's too many, obviously Donald Trump, the former president, will run the table again because he has that core MAGA support.
Sure. Yeah. And you make a good point. It's no walk in the park to run against Donald Trump. And it's very easy to see some of these folks walk into this and get beat up pretty quickly. But your point is a really important one. A lot of these places, you just need a plurality of the votes to win all of the delegates. And so if you have a bunch of people jumping in the race and splitting all of those votes, that's kind of what happened to Donald Trump in the first place. He never had a clear majority of Republican voters in the 2016 primary, but he won. So if it's him versus Ron DeSantis, that's a pretty good, fair fight. But if you start seeing a Nikki Haley, a Chris Christie, a Glenn Youngkin maybe jumping in, and you're splitting that somewhat anti-Trump vote 4 or 5 ways, that's a recipe for sending Donald Trump back to the GOP nomination. So people need to be very careful about this. I'm actually not convinced there's going to be a big primary in terms of a lot of people, just because I don't think a lot of these people want to go toe-to-toe with Donald Trump. A lot of them are a lot younger than him, can kind of wait him out. As we've seen, he goes after people pretty hard. And that's a tough decision to say you want to jump in and be a part of that.
Let's look at the potential competition for Republicans there. It could be President Biden. Very well could be President Biden. He will be very old, historically old, when it comes to being reelected as president. But I do have to ask you, I mean, if you're looking at the Biden presidency right now and the message he's going to send out there, he will have some victories, obviously not the border. But if there is a soft landing, if they're able to get inflation under control before Election Day, we just saw him bring back Brittany Griner. We see the U.S. government still funding weapons to Ukraine able to fend off the Russians for a while. I just wonder, even though Biden will be much older, if he's still going to be someone that's going to be very tough to beat in 2024.
It's hard to obviously predict the future, but I'll give you another one. A House Republican in Congress. That is what Barack Obama was able to use to his advantage to get reelected. It's what Bill Clinton was able to use to his advantage to get reelected. So there is the chance that you're going to have Republicans overreach and make Joe Biden look pretty good. By contrast, a lot of unknowns, but I do think at this point he's a relatively vulnerable incumbent. While his numbers have improved, he is still not polling at a very high rate. So that's probably what's going to encourage a lot of Republicans to jump in. They see this as, and probably why Donald Trump jumped in so quickly, they see this as somebody vulnerable, but the world could look very, very different in a couple of years. And so we've got a long ways to go until then.
Brendan Buck, I thank you for the great conversation. Thanks for joining Top Story tonight. Still ahead tonight, the officer ambushed. The correctional officer shot and killed outside of an Atlanta area jail. The surveillance image just released as police hunt for his killer. Plus, Grammy-winning rapper Megan Thee Stallion taking the stand in the assault trial against Tory Lanez. What she says led up to the Lanez allegedly shooting her in the foot 2 years ago. Troves of evidence up in flames, the massive fire tearing through an NYPD lot in Brooklyn, what police say was being held there. Stay with us. All right, we're back now with the manhunt near Atlanta. A corrections officer ambushed and killed. And it all happened outside of the jail where he worked. That's right, murdered outside a building, crawling with law enforcement. Authorities now questioning how this could happen as they release a new image of that suspect. Stephen Romo following this one for us.
Tonight, police in Gwinnett County, Georgia, in a desperate search for this person, investigating the murder of a senior corrections officer killed in a shooting right outside the correctional center where he worked just before sunrise. The victim, 59-year-old Scott Reiner, was reporting to work when authorities say he got into some type of confrontation with the gunman.
It's still too early to know if this could have been a random act or a targeted act, but we are following up on every avenue.
They say the suspect ran away on foot after that incident.
As far as we know, the person got away on foot, but they could have had a vehicle in the area that we don't know about yet.
Investigators so far have released only these grainy photos taken from surveillance cameras showing an unknown person in the parking lot at the time of the shooting.
They'll be looking at whether or not there was any retaliation. And of course, if there's any video that's in the parking lot area or on any vehicles that may have been around, they'll be looking at that as well to see if they can find the perpetrator.
Governor Brian Kemp sharing his condolences, tweeting in part, "Join us in praying for the family and loved ones of Officer Scott Reiner of Gwinnett County. As we join them in mourning this tragic loss, we're also eager to see his killer brought to justice." Reiner's co-workers also remembering him.
He treated inmates fair. he did what he was supposed to do.
Anytime that we lose one of our own, it is extremely difficult, extremely emotional, but what the police department is going to do to help him and honor his memory and his family is to work this case as hard as we can and to catch the person that did this.
All right, Stephen Romo joins us now live in studio. So, Stephen, just a lot of questions here. I mean, this murder happens outside of a jail. How can there not be more surveillance footage of the person who did this? It's so strange. I mean, even the image they released, it's hard to tell.
Yeah, I was so surprised to see we were getting a new image, both of them so grainy. You know, we think a jail would have lots of different angles, lots of different video options right now. This is all they've released right now. It's possible they do have more. This is all we're getting at the moment, in part because our legal experts say, our law enforcement experts say that they may not want to release it all right now. But we do know that police are asking for more video from people who may have been driving in the surrounding area early that morning. They're asking specifically for dash cam video. So clearly they have more questions. They want more video, something many people are asking. How do we not have
Which leads you to believe maybe they don't have a lot of images. The other thing is, so the police are saying, I understand it's early in the investigation, they're not sure if he was targeted. But you got to think, who goes to a jail to kill a corrections officer? I mean, it's just so brazen.
Right. There's lots of speculation on what the reasoning could be. But from what police know right now, they say they have no reason to believe it was targeted or to know if it was random. So they're not really revealing either direction what this could be. Some of the many questions people have, especially the law enforcement there and this man's family, Tom.
OK, Stephen Romo for us. Stephen, we appreciate that. Thank you. We turn now to that high-profile assault trial against rapper Tory Lanez. He's accused of shooting fellow rapper and Grammy winner Megan Thee Stallion in the foot more than 2 years ago. Megan's fans gathering outside the courthouse today was quite a scene as she took the stand for the first time. Dana Griffin has the latest from L.A.
Megan Thee Stallion made her way into a Los Angeles courthouse today. The famous Grammy-winning rapper, known for her tough-as-nails persona, testifying against rapper Tory Lanez, whose real name is Daystar Peterson. Peterson is on trial for allegedly shooting Megan. In a packed courtroom, she testified today that following a party at Kylie Jenner's house, she got out of her SUV, and then Peterson pointed a gun at her and told her to dance, and then fired at her feet.
He said, "Dance, bitch." And he started shooting, and I'm just like, oh my God.
The rapper said she felt shock and hurt and saw blood when she looked down. According to police, her feet were bleeding profusely. Bullet fragments were later removed. The savage performer continued her emotional testimony, saying, "I can't believe I have to come here and do this." Peterson's attorney telling NBC News, "Once the whole case comes out, I think we're confident the jury will find my client not guilty, and he'll be exonerated of all the charges." Defense attorneys also say Kylie Jenner may potentially be called as a witness. Dana Griffin, NBC News, Los Angeles.
All right, we thank Dana a lot for doing that story for us tonight. Coming up next, the wave of corruption in Latin America. Deadly protests breaking out in Peru after the president was impeached. The corruption charges he and now other leaders across that region are facing. We'll explain. Stay with us. All right, back now with Top Stories news feed, and we start with a small plane crash in Texas. New video showing the flaming wreckage after the single-engine plane crash-landed in the Dallas suburb of Carrollton. Get this. As you look at those pictures, both people on board surviving. They are expected to be okay. No one on the ground was hurt either. The FAA and the NTSB, of course, now investigating that crash. A massive fire destroying troves of evidence in New York City. Aerial footage shows the flames and the huge plumes of black smoke engulfing an NYPD warehouse in Brooklyn. Police say the lot holds seized cars, trucks, bikes, and biological evidence that dates back decades. Firefighters expect the fire to burn for multiple days. The cause, of course, why this happened, all under investigation. And history today at the White House. Did you see this? President Biden signing the Respect for Marriage Act during a ceremony on the South Lawn. The bill codifying federal protections for same-sex and interracial marriages. Hundreds attended the signing, including both Democratic and Republican members of Congress. Okay, we want to turn now to the Americas and the political fallout for a number of ex-presidents across the region. In the last week alone, 4 former heads of state and a former vice president from Central and South America have all been charged or sentenced with corruption charges. Guad Venegas tonight on what's leading this wave of accountability.
growing unrest in Peru after violent protests erupted over the weekend. A human rights group in Peru reporting at least 6 people have died in clashes just days after the ouster of former President Pedro Castillo, last week impeached and arrested for rebellion and conspiracy while separately facing corruption charges. His vice president, Dina Boluarte, has since been sworn in as president, including a new cabinet that includes an anti-corruption pledge. But protesters are now calling for presidential elections to be moved up and held as soon as possible.
Dina Boluarte no nos representa, es una traidora, es una incapaz y ahorita tiene que estar presa porque ya hay muchos muertos en el país.
The deadly demonstrations are the latest in a tumultuous week for Latin America. Government officials from 4 different countries facing corruption charges.
There's an epidemic of corruption in Latin America right now, and the constant prosecution of former presidents is just the tip of the iceberg.
Mascota de ellos no voy a ser nunca. Así me den no 6 años, me den 20 años.
Just last Tuesday, Argentina's vice president, Cristina Fernández de Kirchner, sentenced to 6 years in prison and barred from holding public office again.
Lastima al pueblo de Guatemala, lastima al sistema de justicia.
A day later, a Guatemalan court sentencing both former President Otto Pérez and his vice president Roxana Valdetti to 16 years in prison after corruption revelations forced the two out of office early. The former president says he will appeal. And over the weekend, a Panamanian judge summoned former President Ricardo Martinelli to stand trial for money laundering.
Lo que se hizo aquí no tiene nombre. Todo el Estado contra un individuo.
Martinelli maintains his innocence and claims he's being politically targeted. Is there a wave of accountability that is new in Latin America?
There are increasingly strident public demands for accountability. Latin America is struggling enormously right now economically and from the public health consequences of the pandemic. And so there's very little tolerance right now for misconduct by public officials and the misuse of scarce public resources.
A struggle for transparency and a battle against corruption underway. Guad Venegas, NBC News.
Okay, we thank Guad for that. Now to top stories, Global Watch. And the search for survivors after a deadly flood and landslide hit the Democratic Republic of Congo. New video shows entire roadways ripped apart in the capital city of Kinshasa. Homes submerged and residents seen wading through waist-deep water. So far, at least 100 people killed, dozens more injured. And Jin from the mega popular K-pop group BTS, well, he's just begun his military service in South Korea. The 30-year-old greeted by crowds of fans as he arrived at boot camp. South Korea is stepping up security around that base as people waited in the cold for a chance to see the superstar. He is the oldest member of the group and the first one to begin 18 months of mandatory frontline service, the group on a hiatus from performing as they enlist. Okay, when we come back, the exclusive interview with Jay Leno, the comedian sitting down with our Hoda Kotb, his chilling recollection of the moment his face caught on fire. You'll hear what happened next. Back now with Jay Leno, speaking out for the first time since he was seriously burned in a fire inside his famous car garage. The comedian speaking exclusively to our Hoda Kotb about the accident and the moment he realized he was in trouble. Take a listen.
Tell me what happened that day.
Well, it was a 1907 white steam car. The fuel line was clogged, so I was underneath it trying to clog, and I said, blow some air through the line. And suddenly, boom, I got a face full of gas. And then the pilot light jumped and my face caught on fire. And I said to my friend, Dave, I'm on fire. And then, oh my God, Dave, my friend, pulled me out and jumped on top of me and kind of smothered the fire.
And that is just the beginning of the story. You can catch the full interview tomorrow morning exclusively on the Today Show. Okay, when we come back, Argentina advancing to the World Cup final, Messi's headline-making performance as he chases that World Cup title, and what will likely be his last appearance at the tournament. We're on the ground in Doha with how fans there are reacting. That's next. That was Argentine soccer legend Diego Maradona scoring the so-called goal of the century in a quarterfinal game against England in the 1986 World Cup. Argentina would go on to win the entire tournament that year, something they have not done since. But that can all change this weekend after the team, captained by soccer star Lionel Messi, beat Croatia in the semifinals today, bringing them one step closer to the trophy once again. For the latest from Qatar, we're joined by NBC News' Megan Fitzgerald.
Tom, Argentina is advancing to the finals with a 3-0 win over Croatia. Now look, the breakdown of this game, we saw both teams coming out aggressively. It wasn't until about 34 minutes into the first half that we saw a point on the board. Leno Messi taking a penalty kick, sinking the ball in the right-hand corner of the net. A couple of minutes later, another point for Argentina. Going into the half, 2-0. They finally shut the game down in the second half, 3-0. Argentina fans are so excited. Take a listen.
We are so happy to see Messi for the last World Cup in his life. We will witness this lovely moment. Hope they will win the cup. Yay!
I never doubted. I always thought Messi can do it, and he's amazing. And I hope that they win.
Now, Argentina will play the winner of tomorrow night's game between France and Morocco. Of course, this is a historic matchup. Morocco, the first African nation to advance to the semifinals. So all eyes are going to be on that game. And then, of course, the finals on Sunday. Tom?
The world will be watching. We thank Megan for that report, and we thank you for watching Top Story tonight. I'm Tom Llamas in New York. Stay right there. More news on the way.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.